Uh, uh, okay. Oh boy. All right. Sorry, what's up, Dan? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well.
Let me just get this link out there because I had the wrong link up. So I don't know how to like redo it. It's like all messed up. Just bear with me here, bro.
Sure.
Oh boy, this is just what's up, Dan? How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well.
Let me just get this link out there because I had the wrong link up. So I don't know how to redo it. It's like, okay. I gotta get all this shit out, bro. What a fucking mess. Sorry, Dan. This is
No problem. I've been there.
yeah. I've never done this before, so I don't really, this is just how it works. Okay, and I could do that. All right, I think we're ready to rock. Hold on, because I'm recording this for my podcast too, so I got to make sure the audio works. Um, mhm, We'll begin in about 2 minutes. We good? All right, we'll just wait another 2 minutes here.
Good.
We'll just wait till a couple more people come in the room, Dan, and we'll begin.
Okay.
Begin at 9:05. Appreciate you taking the time here, bro.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem, man. Trying to save the world here.
Absolutely. One person at a time.
You know it. You know it. What I'll do is when we get questions, I'll just read them off to you later on in the show. People might want to ask stuff, so I'll just read them off. I got the YouTube chat. I can't really keep up with it and listen to you at the same time, so we'll go from there.
Okay.
All right, let's hit the music and we'll go. Here we go. Welcome everyone to Be Better Betters. I'm the host, Spanky. Thanks for listening. My guest this week has been working in gambling addiction for 15 years. He perfected his craft at the UCLA Gambling Studies program, and now he's a teacher at the USC Masters in Social Work program. He runs his own successful practice and is here to kind of share his takes on what it's like to deal with people involved in gambling addiction. Please welcome Dan Field. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Spanky. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure's all mine. So Dan, how did you, let's talk about how the practice first started. What made you decide to go into therapy, not just gambling therapy? I think you started off with other therapies. How did the therapy guy come out in you?
Well, I started out as a public high school teacher, actually, in San Francisco, where I was raised. And I found that in working with special ed and with kids with disabilities, that there was only so much I could do in a group setting. I was more, sort of keeping order in the classroom. So I really wanted to go into therapy. I wasn't really clear on what avenue, excuse me, I wanted to go into. And I applied for a program at UCLA. I got my master's in social work. And soon enough, I was working in homeless services at the VA. And there was so much substance abuse and addiction there. And I really connected to that issue because, there are reasons why people get addicted to stuff. It's not just that they like the taste of alcohol or they like the way cocaine makes them feel. There's usually an underlying mood disorder or, trauma or, unresolved issues that they're working with. So the VA was a good place for me to get my training. And I worked in 3 of their residential programs. And there were a lot of addictions, not just drug addiction. There was a lot of sex addiction, there was gambling addiction, there was a whole host of issues. And I just love sitting in a room with someone for an hour and talking about what makes them tick, their history, and listening with my ears and with my heart. And, each person's different, and there's a different reason why people seek therapy and why they get addicted to different things. And someone who drinks is different than someone who uses cocaine, is different than someone who gambles. What I liked about gambling addiction treatment was that there was a tangible result, not just financially, but financially you could see it on a paper. If people were addressing their addiction, they were managing their money better generally, because that's part of the treatment for gambling addiction is better money management. And they were getting a hold of their emotional well-being as well. So, I got trained in 2011 in gambling studies addiction. I was working mostly with meth and stimulant addiction at the time. And it just was a good fit. I think because I'm a competitive person myself, playing sports in high school and just my upbringing. I know what it feels like to want to win. And I know how that kind of gets hijacked by the gambling industry, and someone, totally unintended, gets involved in watching sports, betting on sports, and it can capture you really quickly and it can destroy things really quickly. And so I was really motivated to help people with their addiction and getting their financial and emotional lives back on track. And the more I've done this, and the more I've seen, the preponderance of offshore and onshore betting sites and the availability of betting on sports, the more I was motivated to help with this specific issue. Because when I was working in a residential treatment program for problem gambling, I saw that this sports betting thing is really blowing up, and that the majority of people presenting for services were younger and more quickly addicted, and the damage was severe, very, very fast. So I decided to hone in on this issue of sports betting. But my training in general addictions and my work at the VA and underlying mood disorders and co-occurring issues with mental health really serves my work with sports betting. And so that's what I do now. The bulk of my clients are gambling addicts. Some are traditional brick and mortar slots players, blackjack players, baccarat still very much in the mix. But increasingly, it's all about sports betting, and that's why I developed the website stopbettingsports.com.
Beautiful. All right. So I liked it because therapists, a lot of people, therapy is good for a lot of people, and it helps a lot of people. So I know, there's, is there a roadmap as to be a good therapist? Like, I know you said you're a good listener, you have a good heart. What is it exactly that kind of makes a good therapist, not just in gambling, but in any type of therapy? I kind of want you to step back and kind of give me a big picture on what it takes from the beginning to the end of a treatment, where you prescribe, let's just say, a 10-session treatment or whatever. And, are you, are there goals involved? Do you set goals? We can even take it to gambling if you want. Like, somebody comes in, their life's in shambles or whatever. What kind of goals you set? Do you set mini goals, mini hurdles to jump over? How are you making it, Dan, so that you can say, okay, we've succeeded? Is it stop gambling altogether? Is it reducing it? And like you said, money management. Take me through that step-by-step program on the progression of being able to have a successful treatment session.
Well, the first thing is to really discern why they're in the treatment session. Part of the UCLA program is that they call 1-800-GAMBLER and they're hitting bottom, or they're really dejected, despairing, and broke. And that's actually a good place for me to start, because they're at that bottom and they're very motivated for treatment, and they're not having blinders on about the fact that this gambling is an issue. But in the first session is really to get a sense of what gambling is and what it's done for their life, what they like about it, and what it's done in terms of the destruction, and to get them to articulate that. And then when I can really get them to articulate that and sort of revel in the badness of the bottom, the real hardship that they've experienced, they feel that they have been heard, and that I understand both the bad parts of it and the good part. But I'm constantly trying to figure out, are they motivated for treatment for something that they see as a problem in their life? Or is it a girlfriend, a parent, or someone else who's kind of coercing them, forcing them into treatment? My therapy has been part of a housing plan, so to speak. You go to therapy with Dan and you won't lose your housing, type of thing. And that's not a good place for me to start. But then, yeah, it's about listening. I don't want to be prescribing things that they should do if they're not vested in it. So I really have to discern how serious they think the problem is, and do they want to do the heavy lifting work to get themselves out of the problem? Because the solution in the past was, the solution to gambling is more gambling. So I'm proposing that they stop gambling, and they're obviously at a very low point because what gambling has done financially and emotionally, and sit in that place and work together to create treatment goals that they're vested in, that they're articulating to me. There's a lot of talk in Department of Mental Health here in LA about client-centered goals. It's really true. The client has to be at the forefront of what they want out of this treatment. And I have to see the potential that they can actually realize those things without relying on their addiction. So, often with gambling and other addictions, they're co-occurring mood disorder. I think about depression in particular. And so I'm talking about, gentle nudges towards, getting into a physical fitness plan and accountability there, gentle nudge into sleep hygiene. Let's put down our phones at like 11 or 12. Let's try to keep them off until 7 or 8 in the morning. Let's wake up. A meditation or stillness minute or 5 minutes. There are timers that I give, analog timers, where people are just standing still for 5 minutes doing nothing, reflecting on gambling and reflecting on their intention. So things kind of quiet down and you refocus and recalibrate and start integrating behavioral health into your weekly regimen, and accountability there, and motivation too.
That's great. I like this in the sense of, you're trying to make it so that there's other distractions that kind of keep them away from the gambling, which makes sense. Let's talk about, I think examples would be a great thing. Is there, you probably seen the best of the best, worst of the worst come through your doors. Let's go through some stories and, how bad does it really get when it comes to gambling addiction, Dan?
It gets emotionally painful. And when I think about the stories, I think not just about the gamblers themselves, but their families, the moms and the dads and the girlfriends that are just realizing or hearing about how bad the financial damage has got. And there's shocking stories like, a gambler at the residential program who was 750,000 deep in gambling debt and navigating that with his family. I mean, luckily his parents had a lot of money. Really feel that affluence and money is a mixed blessing in a lot of people's lives. I appreciate that now in a different way. And then there's more run-of-the-mill things. As I was thinking about extreme cases, there's a young man, not so young anymore, who is on disability at the VA. And when that disability check comes in, his compulsion to sports bet gets too strong, just like drug addicts. The money comes in, you want to use, you want to gamble. And once again, as of yesterday, he finds himself in this position of being absolutely broke and owing a lot of friends and bookies and payday loans money. So, it's the very glamorous, I don't want to say glamorous, but the very dramatic scenario where someone's walking along train tracks wanting to jump on or jump off a bridge. Those have been real instances that I've dealt with. And the more run-of-the-mill, passive, if you will, suicidal ideation, where you just feel so hopeless because of the hole that you've dug for yourself and so hopeless about ever getting out of it. You're not actually going to kill yourself, but you just feel so shitty. And your parents are angry at you, and your girlfriend may be leaving you because you've lied to her repeatedly. I'm in a position sometimes of justifying bad behavior on the part of the gambler because I understand that lying and stealing is part of the disorder. It's not okay, but it's part of the addiction. And that's sort of a difficult line for me to draw with some families because, am I excusing the bad behavior or not? But yeah, there's a lot of, from people that have just gambled for a year or so and created a lot of destruction to those like Joel, your guest last week, who's been gambling for decades and has a more pervasive pattern of problem gambling.
All right. Let's, because this is fascinating stuff. Let's just say I'm like you just said, somebody that's betting his whole paycheck and he's broke as of yesterday. What's the plan here? How do you take that guy and not have him spend his paycheck? What do you say to him? Pretend I'm the guy. Let's do a sample therapy session. What are the techniques that you're using here?
Well, Spanky, I don't know if we want to do a mock interview or, me sort of like meta, decide, but I'm going to assess, can you handle your money? Do you need not a fiduciary or a payee, but for some gambling addicts, you can't handle your money. And because I've been doing this for a few years now, I kind of get a sense of, wow, this person just is completely needing someone to dole out cash allowance, which has been the prescription for some people. But taking away your money is like taking away your mojo for a lot of people. A lot of people just won't sign up for it. And I never
because you treat them like a little kid, essentially.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I say, listen, I don't think that you can stop gambling if you have a paycheck coming in. And we need to get that first 30, 60, 90 days of not gambling. So I'm really going to recommend that you let your wife handle your paycheck. It gets sticky when family members are handling money, but that's the thing, access to money. If you need money to gamble, then let's take the access away so you can't gamble. But I'm generally not a fan of safeguards. I've had some couples that have GPS tracking devices on their phone, and when they drive to the casino, they want to know if they're at the casino. And even self-exclusion programs, where you ban yourself, it has to be a deep conviction from within. Where there's a will, there's a way. So you're self-excluded in Hollywood Park or Commerce Casino in California. If you really want to gamble, you're going to find a way, maybe even going to Vegas or whatever. It has, those are Band-Aid treatments, and they can be helpful, and they have been helpful. But I do talk about self-exclusion and access to money. But I really want to talk and get to the heart of why you want to stop gambling for you, not for your dad or not for your wife or partner or whatever, why you want to do it.
So what is that? What drives people to just not stop gambling? Is it is the dream of getting rich? Is it just, to try to just get that high of sweating a game, particularly in sports betting? Describe it to me. What is, in all the therapies that you've done, what is it that drives people to just want to keep betting sports?
I think it's a combination, most profoundly the high. I think it's most like you're doing research on a game. It's kind of like, to use a sex analogy, you're kind of getting aroused, you don't have an erection yet, but you're kind of getting primed up. You know what's going to happen. And then you make a decision. So there's a level of excitement, and then the game starts and the action really starts. And so all of that anticipation, and then, the pop, you win or you lose. And even if you lose, there's a renewed determination to get back in the action. It's like, okay, I got to regroup my efforts. I got to okay, that was a bad call, but Dan, you can do it better next time. And then you're pumping yourself up for the next time, and the cycle starts. So it's a lot about the action. A lot of it is misguided views about wealth and greed and retribution. When I get my money, no one's going to tell me what to do. No one's going to fuck with me, no, I'm going to be free of my parents' desires for me, and I'm going to show all those people wrong, And then if you're really in deep, you want a big payout because you want to just get back to zero, so you can just get out of this gambling thing clean. I've lost 100 grand or 200 grand. I just want to win big and then I'm out, type of thing, So there can be that too.
Yeah, chasing your loss. That's always it's a factor that I've always seen from a lot. Oh man, Dan, this is just it's emotional stuff hearing you tell those stories and how people would, I've heard it so much, and it's a serious problem. How with respect, can somebody in treatment, when you go to AA, GA, whatever, it's been 120 days since I had my last drink. It's been 230 days since I placed my last bet. Can you treat someone to be able to go towards moderation? Or is it always the extreme case of it's either you're gambling or you're not gambling?
Initially, I really encourage abstinence to get a sense of where you are emotionally outside of the gambling. And when I say initially, I'm talking 6 to 12 months. I'm working with people that are investing on Robinhood now, and I've weathered some emotional fallout from crypto losses recently. And where do you go when you're investing? Because you don't want to just hold all your money in a savings account with inflation. So with investing, it's a little different. I recommend moderation, i.e. an index fund or something that you're not checking the market daily. There are questions about camaraderie with friends and fantasy leagues. Do I have to pull out a fantasy? And I make the case somewhat unconvincingly that fantasy kind of fans the flames of more larger bets. So I'm very much in the camp of gravitating away from all fantasy sports and sports betting activities and very conservative on any kind of investing, no NFT or crypto stuff, more index funds. I had a guy that just wanted to bet on Super Bowl, and so I'm not your mom. You can do what you want. Everyone has self determination, and he did that, and that had middling positive effects generally. I mean, why not let it go? If it's bad in your life, and that's the goal of those initial therapy sessions, to get the person to articulate to himself that this is bad, this is not working. If it's bad, why not get rid of it in its totality?
Agreed. Now, let's just say somebody comes, because sports betting is one of those addictions where it's a problem for some people, but for myself, obviously it's a solution. It's how I support my family. So there is that dream of kind of converting that problem into a solution. Do people come into therapy and try to convince you or convince themselves that they found the secret formula? They found that holy grail of, what, this is something that I think I have an edge on. I'm able to support myself. Is that rabbit hole explored far too often?
People have explored that within their own life endlessly before they come to see me. And they still come to see me with, if I only bet on baseball, or if I only bet on, and it's never basketball, it's usually some sport, then I would be golden. But it's that I get greedy or I start chasing. So I've had people in this is also in poker context as well, people that are playing poker, but then they get greedy or they want to make money quickly, so they play baccarat or blackjack. Teach me, Dan, how to just play poker, or teach me how to just play baseball. And that's too confusing for me. It has to be more of a, let's look at gambling at the aggregate. There's a reason why you called Dan Field, and that reason is because this isn't working for you. So it's working for you, Spanky, because you're in that, what I'm convinced is less than 1% of the people that are betting on sports and making a living at it. It's working for some, which makes my messaging a little confusing, because it is, there are people that can make it work, but my perspective is somewhat skewed because I never meet any of those people except for you.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's what makes it so, kind of like you said, it's that gray area where people are always trying to solve the puzzle, or make it so that they can make a little extra cash. And it's hard. It's like it's not just like any other addiction, where like alcoholism and drugs. You know what I mean? That these are just temporary highs with no long-term positive effects.
Right.
Whereas in gambling, if you get good enough, you could see that there's positive effects, but it's still, it's not to live life. Just to speak to anybody out there listening, to live life as a professional gambler is not all the glitz and glamour that it's supposed to be. It's very difficult, and you don't, I don't have a guaranteed paycheck. I don't have, there's days in which we could work all day long and I lose money. That's what profession offers that, what I mean? Where you're doing hard work and you actually have to pay to actually work. So it's the glitz and glamour is not all there. It's a tough thing. I just fell into it. I don't really advise anybody to kind of want to think that you could gamble for a living, or not that I could stop anything. Just like you said, Dan, everybody's an adult here, but to be able to do something, to think that, hey, listen, I could do this for a living. Usually, if you're smart enough to gamble for a living, you probably are smart enough to do something a lot better and a lot more. You can make a lot more money, and it'll be a lot more safer. So you can actually decrease the risk, increase the return, which is the best thing out of it all. So I don't know. I definitely, in this day and age, I kind of push everybody. If somebody says I want to go pro, I'd always say, I'd think otherwise. This podcast is called Be Better Betters. We're trying to make everybody a better, but to be a full-time successful better, it really is very difficult.
And I appreciate you saying that, and that's my sense of it. And the image from younger sports bettors is that there is the glamour behind it, there is the quick rewards, and because they've turned $100 into 2,500, people have had those experiences, and that intermittent reward captures the imagination, you don't look at it in the aggregate, you know?
Of course, yeah, and sometimes that once big win is all you need to just keep the dream alive. I think that's going to happen again and again and again, and it's so difficult. So, and then you sort of talk about train tracks. Let's get this real here, because I want to, have you again. I'm no names or whatever, but have you ever, given your years of therapy, has there ever been suicide issues where somebody actually pulled the plug and actually the gambling, they just couldn't take it? And how does that feel as a therapist? Did you feel a sense of shit, I lost the guy, or I could have done more? Because I could imagine, man, it's a tough business what you do. All you're listening to is sad, stories all day long.
Well, yeah. There's a toll on the therapist, but yes, absolutely. I have not lost a gambling client to suicide, thank goodness. I have had many clients that have passive suicidal ideation or more threatening suicidal ideations. Scenarios where people want to drive into the other lane. Scenarios, the train track scenario. It's always on the back burner of my awareness and of many gamblers. I'm aware that the gambling addiction has the highest rate of suicide of all the addictions. So I'm not normalizing talks about suicide, but I bring it up in every session. I assess for suicidality in every session. And, particularly with some clients that have co-occurring severe depression. And I know that the worthlessness and the hopelessness that can result from a really bad gambling loss repeatedly is very dangerous, and that it can be a very impulsive act. It can be, you didn't wake up this morning intending to commit suicide, but things got so bad that you jumped out of a window. So there is a threat for mortality. And, before the podcast, you're saying, we're saving lives. And yes, we are. This is a life and death issue. And it's a progressive disease. The more you gamble, the more likely you're going to cement this feeling of hopelessness of ever getting out of it, not seeing that there's hope. So suicidal ideation and suicide attempts and successful attempts are a real issue for problem gamblers.
What have you ever, when you're talking with gamblers and suicide comes up, do they brush it off like, no, I'll never get to that extreme? Or is it, like you said, is it more once you bring it up, is that an underlying factor in the back of every gambler's mind that they could just end it by just, ending it? So,
Well, it's tricky because they know that if I think that they're in imminent danger of suicide, I'm going to lose my mental health license if I don't call the paramedics and get the authorities involved. So I often get the caveat. Yeah, I think about, I ruminate on death, or I'm thinking about ending my life, but I'm not really going to do it.
Yeah.
They don't want a headache right now. But I double back down. I assess that the lethality is not there. They've assured me that they're not in imminent danger. But then I double down, or I double back on that talk of suicide. Like, when do you feel that way? What you're feeling, and I talk about hopelessness. That's a more palatable word than suicidal ideation. And there is hope. Things do get better. Things are hard. And when you're broke, and when your girlfriend is angry at you, or you don't have a partner, or you don't have a house, or you realize that you've been in denial so long about your gambling addiction that this behavior is just not going to work anymore, it's very hard to face that music. And that's why it's important that people like me and others that are working in gambling addiction give people a venue to be listened to and heard about their hopelessness. And it needs to be aired. I'm not going to brush over to how things are going to be great in a year when you're not gambling for a year in that first session. People feel dejected, broke, exhausted, and hopeless. And that just needs to be said. And when that's said, things get a little bit better,
Typical client, how many sessions do they need to have with you, Dan, to kind of get them, fixed, as they say, or, just get the gambling addiction under control?
Well, my Stop Betting Sports program is a 1 month program. And then if that month goes well, which it typically does, we'll do another month, and then we'll do another month. I want them to commit to 4 weeks of sessions.
Mm,
So it's not just a week to week thing.
yeah.
You know, addiction is chronic and progressive. So ideally, you need treatment for the rest of your life. I was telling a client today who is doing well that, okay, we're going to twice a month now, but I think that once a month appointment for the rest of your life. I was half joking, but I really feel that way. You never want to forget that this is an issue, even if you do want to forget. One of the things that happens is, like, a year or two in, people get married, they're not gambling, they're doing well. They kind of want to forget Dan and the therapy. That was great, I did it. But I worry about complacency 3-5 years in.
Mm,
And so I'm really trying to encourage, not just because it's a good business model for me, I get, a session a month or whatever, but that it's really important to revisit this conversation of your gambling and what it did to you when you first had to see me. But yeah, typically I'll see people for 3 to 6 months. On average, it's probably 6 months, but it can be less than that too.
what is a therapy with you, Dan? How does that compare to, like, a Gamblers Anonymous meeting? What are the differences? What are the similarities? How do you feel about Gamblers Anonymous? How do you feel about 1-800-GAMBLER and all the other avenues that are out there?
Well, it differs because GA is a peer-based group with other gamblers, and the only requirement is a desire to stop gambling. And that's a group setting, and people share, for 2 minutes. In a GA meeting, though, you may have a share, but there's not an exploration of things that were said in that share. So in a therapy session, someone will say something to me, and I'll listen to it, and I'll say, hey, wait a minute, let's go back to this topic. And because it's in an enclosed space, virtual or physical space, there's a degree of intimacy and safety that exists in a therapy session. In a one-on-one, they know that I'm not going to spill their beans. In a GA session, meeting, there can be a sense of, I don't know these people or what they're going to say, even though the principle is to be anonymous. So, therapy session is facilitated by a licensed mental health person. There can be mental health clinicians at a GA meeting, but not necessarily. GA meeting, you have a sponsor, you have the support of the group. You can have the identification with a group member, like, he gets me because he's a gambler too, and because I don't have a history of problem gambling myself. There could be that lack of identification because I'm not a gambler myself. But I think they complement each other really, really well. And I recommend that people that are seeking therapy go to a GA meeting and give it a shot, especially now post-COVID where it's online. It's not like you have to drive to Burbank for an hour. There are in-person meetings, but there's a lot of virtual meetings as well. And I know people that just stop gambling with GA. As a therapist, I tend to be a little skeptical of that. I think everyone needs therapy to some degree. You need that place to just talk about the shit that you're going through. That's what therapy is,
Do you see a therapist?
Not currently, but last year I was, and periodically in my life I do.
Nice. I don't want to get personal. I'm just saying, if you think everybody needs a therapist, I guess, I'd ask if you used it, but that's good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about 1-800-GAMBLER? I see that advertisement all the time, on the bottom of these sports book apps and all these other things. And, is that any good?
It is good. I'm part of the 1-800-GAMBLER program.
So you would answer the phone. Like, how does that work?
You'll get an operator who has some training in gambling addiction treatment, and will listen to your problem and get a sense of where you are geographically in the state of California, and then pair you up in what they call a warm handoff with a therapist like me. And 1-800-GAMBLER is part of the UCLA Gambling Studies program, which provides no-cost therapy for gamblers, that can't afford it.
Gotcha. So that's just it's good for people that don't, not being able to financially afford therapy is not an excuse when it comes to gambling therapy. There are enough avenues out there that you can, that or government aided and or other aided avenues that you don't need to put up the money. You're telling me.
That's right. That's especially true in the state of California. I think that California, because of a bill passed in the legislature and taking a portion of the funds from the casinos for prevention and treatment, has created this 1-800-GAMBLER program. So if you have no money through 1-800-GAMBLER, you can speak to a therapist for free. It's a great program.
Beautiful. Let's talk about the casinos and the sports books out there. The advertisements since regulation has passed several years now. How has that impacted? Obviously, your client list and StopBettingSports.com has probably increased it by X factor. Are the sports books, do you believe, or are they doing enough? Could they do more? Do they even care? And I know, you're probably friendly, or, I don't want you to walk on eggshells here, but do the best you can, and try to be as real as possible on this.
Well, I think that they need to bear a lot of the responsibility for the increasing amount of problem gamblers in the state of California and nationwide. And there are departments within DraftKings and FanDuel that are working on problem gambling and addressing problem gambling issues. And there are supposedly ways through these websites in which problem gamblers can be flagged. But, my point of view is that the overriding desire for these companies is to generate revenue, and it's a money game.
Yeah.
And that the human cost of problem gamblers, and not that they don't care so much, but they care more about the dollars. So although there's a lot of effort, and I was at the National Council of Problem Gambling Conference in Boston, and DraftKings and FanDuel were present there, and the people that spoke on behalf of those organizations feel sincere. I just have a general cynicism about their real desire as an overriding organization to address this huge public health crisis of gambling addiction that we're facing right now.
Absolutely, because it's directly contrary to a business model. It's direct.
Exactly.
There's nothing, most of these sports books, sure, your $10 and $20 bettors is one thing, but they focus a lot of the times on getting these big fat rich whales that bet a lot of money, that and the VIP guys, and that's a big portion. The more whales you have, the better. So to be able to push those whales away is just, my God, I could only imagine inside these organizations, you got the one or two people from, the Gamblers Anonymous or the problem gambling, are probably talking to the 100 people that are saying, no, please, this guy, he can handle himself. He's okay, because it's all about revenue. So I believe that these organizations have to have a presence of trying to stop problem gambling, but I think that their voices are completely in the minority, and I think they're just so overwhelmed by the desire to, of course, increase revenue. What do you say to that?
I do. I can imagine boardrooms filled with 19 people that are about revenue and profit and algorithmic ways of getting people compelled to gamble more. And then there's, let's talk to the problem gambler person, like that. They're obligated to have such a department, and they're obligated to have such resources and a 1-800 line, et cetera. But it conflicts with their business model. And so, I don't want to poo-poo or demonize the people that want to make money. We all want to make money in the different businesses that we have, but they're doing it at the backs of problem gamblers that has a real human consequence in American households. And that's what I'm concerned about. And I don't know what the answer is. It seems like a big locomotive that's just heading for the station, and everyone's getting excited about all the money that can be made. But these dollars being pulled out of American families is creating a real hardship and heartache in families that therapists and mediators like me are dealing with increasingly.
with respect to advertisements, you could watch a game or you could watch anything. I don't think you could go a day with watching television without seeing a gambling ad at this point for a sports book, or you go to a ball game, you go to anything. It's just everywhere. There was a time in which cigarette advertisements were prominent in this country, and those are just no longer allowed. Where the Marlboro Man, and then you just
Right.
see all this. So they stopped all that because it was just because of a health crisis that kids were just smoking cigarettes, lung cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a point in which enough is enough, and that this advertisement needs to, if not stop completely, which probably will never happen, but does it need to be managed to an extent that that, hey, listen, let's pull the reins in a little bit here and try to get a hold of this national problem of gambling addiction?
Yes. And I think that in time, it took decades before the cigarette ads were pulled out of magazines, or I guess they weren't pulled out of magazines, off of TV. They eventually will be. And I think that, probably in my dying day, there'll be some changes in this area, but let's not make any mistake about it. These books and these websites are highly addictive and incredibly destructive for people. And so the celebrities and the money behind these efforts to pull people into gambling are very irresponsible. So I would call on the celebrities and the people themselves to just not do that, because it's hurting people.
Yeah.
This hurts.
Yeah, I can't argue with you there. And then, just to flip the coin a little bit, um, this is a revenue-based business that these sports books are running, and they'll have a guy with a check, they'll have an advertisement, oh, winners are welcome, and guys are hitting big jackpots and all this thing. But guys like me at some of these sports books, we're limited to, literally $4.57. They won't take any bets from us. So it's just pure revenue based, and it's there's not there's a side in which they pretend like they care about the whales that have no control, but they'll give them sky's the limit. And then the professionals, of course, we don't even get a fair shake. So it's a complete everything is not worried about the public, or worried about to trying to just treat everybody fairly, and worry about guys that are ruining their lives or jumping off a bridge. Everything, the underlying factor is always to try to maximize revenue in every way, shape, or form. And hopefully that one day could change, like you said, Dan, but I don't see it coming anytime soon.
No, there's too much money to be made, and it's too exciting, and it's a business opportunity. But I hope people look in the mirror and say to themselves, is this really something that I want to get involved in? Making money off the backs of human suffering? Because that's what this is creating, Or maybe people don't care. I think there's a lot of lack of care in the world.
Now, when you say human suffering, now what somebody might say, all right, Dan, listen, I like to bet on a game here and there. I like to have fun on the weekend, watch the games. I'm not suffering. I know I'm going to lose a few dollars, but I want to have a good time. What if somebody says to you, I think you're just over exaggerating? What do you say to that guy that's telling you that?
Well, I would say that my perspective is skewed by the hours that I spend with problem gamblers. And yes, the majority of gamblers are recreational gamblers. The majority of cocaine users are recreational cocaine users. But we're playing with cocaine. Let's not pretend that this is just an innocent activity. This is like crack. And so we need to treat it with the respect that the addictive qualities of crack cocaine has. And that's all I'm saying. And yes, you have a few drinks and hang out with your friends on a Sunday and bet on a game. Recreational gambling can be a life enhancement. I'm not disagreeing with that. I just have my antennae up because I see the potential for severe addiction that can happen so quickly. I just heard a story yesterday, of a person not in treatment, my client's in treatment, his friends, he was very diligent in working through high school, restaurant work, et cetera, lost everything in the course of about 3 months betting on sports. All of that hard work up in smoke. It's destructive. It's highly addictive, and people don't realize how powerfully you can get hooked so quickly and how financially destructive it can be. So I'm not saying get rid of sports betting. I'm not saying it's the devil. my perspective is obviously colored by my experiences in talking to people. But, we are playing with fire, and a lot of people are and will be caught up in this epidemic.
Fair enough. Yeah, I can't disagree. Your website, Stop Betting Sports. So you kind of, you want to push to stop betting sports for people that just can't control themselves.
Yeah.
You don't want to stop betting sports for everybody.
No. And someone that is going to an addiction treatment website is going to be willing to sign up for the program, which is a month at least of not betting sports, talking about your underlying, if you have depression, anxiety, some underlying issues, getting some coaching and accountability for physical exercise and other things.
Can we talk about cost of a 1-month program, or that just depends on the client?
It depends on the client and if I include family sessions, but it's a lot less than a residential treatment program. So typically we're talking about $1,800,
How many sessions does that include?
It includes an assessment with me, and then my partner David will do typically 2 sessions a week for 4 weeks, some family work as needed, and then a follow-up session with me. And I'm also available as well.
When you say family work, how let's talk about the demographic here. I'm guessing all males, or 95%, 99%.
So far,
males?
Since the website has come on, it's been 100% male.
Okay, so it's all males. Not that any female be better problem gamblers out there, but you're all included. But just the demographic of sports betting. So 100% males. What age range are we talking about here?
20s.
20. So young guns, young guns.
So yeah.
Young guns trying to go for the dream. They got they're trying to dream it out. And then so 20s is, let's describe, because this is real. I know a lot of people might listening, they're probably like, I've seen this, I know somebody, this could even be me. Let's talk about, when mom comes on the phone, because you mentioned families. Does mom sometimes make the first call? Is she wailing on the phone? Get into that a little bit. Let's get this real here, because you've heard and seen it, heard it all, seen it all. How deep does it get, Dan?
It gets very deep, and I am almost inevitably first talking to mom or dad about the hole that their kid is in, the dismay that they feel, the disappointment, the anger, the rage that they feel about wasting so much money, the fact that their kid has not been working and has been betting on sports or squandered so much time and money with this. So I have to, excuse the therapeutic term, validate the feelings of the family and really listen to them and provide some support for them, because they're very pissed off and they want some assurance that if they go to Stop Betting Sports, that it's going to work and their kid is going to stop with time.
But you can't give them that assurance.
I can't promise that, but I do say that, let's work on not betting for a month. Let's have I'll mediate some conversations, and let's get some coaching, and let's work a program. But it can get very highly emotional, and then there's also a degree of culpability. One of the things that when I do family work, it's not just the gambler who's at fault. It's dad, often, frankly, that introduced their kid to gambling, that was somewhat irresponsible in taking him to the horse track or the casino on the boat or to Vegas. I've heard all these scenarios. So the kid learns that dad likes gambling or that this is fun, and that influence has to be talked about, because the kid feels like shit, the parents are angry, and there needs to be a discussion about how this happened. It's not just all of a sudden this person's betting on sports. So the addiction exists within the family system. Everyone is involved in it, not just the person that's gambling.
And this crosses all financial lines, where we're talking, lower class, upper class, affluential. Doesn't
Absolutely.
There's no demographic that, oh no, this only happens to the middle class, or it spans the entire financial gamut.
Absolutely. There are very impoverished people that have come to my practice, more brick and mortar casino type gamblers that, have the $25 free play coupon and get their self on the bus to the local casino. And then there are people that are, in deep for hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. The disorder is just as severe. The numbers in a way don't matter. It's the brain disorder. If you're on a fixed income or you make a couple $100,000 a year, the degree of severity of gambling addiction is the same.
Let's talk about, given that there's, you've been doing this for a while before regulation. You've obviously, some people are into it with unregulated bookmakers, street bookies. How do you navigate through that? Do you have, let's talk about what Dan Field, or what you do to try to see if the guy's going to be able to pay his bookmaker off, and what happens there.
Well, I try to prioritize things that need to be paid. And I generally feel that current relationships that are meaningful are the best debts to pay first, because you want to maintain those relationships. One of the big debates in residential gambling treatment is, do you pay your bookies? Do you pay their debts? They're bookies. They know what they're getting into. Maybe they should expect that they're not always going to be paid back. GA's stance is that you pay your debts. You do a pressure relief thing, and you look at the things, and if you owe money, you're ethically obligated to pay them back. In terms of my dealings with bookies themselves and facilitating that, I generally don't do it because I don't really, I'm not in that world so much, but there might be someone, occasionally there's someone who might help navigate that. Usually a strong dad in many cases will be the ones negotiating with the books. When they've called me, they've had to do these types of negotiations before, and I can talk to the parent about how best to navigate that, and usually there can be a payment plan, or they'll get like 25 or 50 cents on the dollar type thing. They just want to get some of their money back.
Yeah, man. No, I hear you. Oh man, it's just such a complicated web. I want to open up now to YouTube chat. Let me pull this up to some questions. If anybody have any questions for Dan, we'll start it up. Let me just open up this YouTube chat here. Okay. Questions start now, and then I'll just take them one step at a time here, and we'll try to get you some questions. And then we'll go from there, Dan. I got the YouTube chat up. Maybe we'll have some guys chime in, have a question or a comment or something that you might be able to help with. But this has been very, very enlightening and educational for me also, as well as I'm pretty sure anybody that's out there that's watching or going to be listening on the podcast. You really have done. You're doing a good deed here, Dan, and 1,800 to be able to essentially cure yourself.
A month of getting
a month,
right, of abstaining and getting some support and therapy.
And let's just say, what percentage of clients only don't return after a month? It's tough because, obviously you're trying to maintain a business.
So far, here. None. So far, all of them have done at least 2 months.
Okay, so 2 months is the minimum. So you got to be in for 3,600.
No. It's just 1 month. But then I say, okay, do you want to do another month? And so far, all of our clients have gone for at least the second month, and some are doing ongoing support.
And it's 1,800 a month.
Yeah, we really, we don't have a fixed price point.
You'll work with somebody on the second month.
Yeah,
you're a businessman. I get it. All right, here we go. Do you ever refer anyone to inpatient treatment?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a program in California that a lot of people I don't think know about, that's no cost residential treatment. And so I have a working relationship with the staff there. So since I'm based in Los Angeles, it's mostly, in and around Los Angeles, and there's a program in Arizona that I've referred to as well.
Beautiful. Very educational. Love the conversation and real life information. Next, do you often find your clients have problems with other types of addiction, such as substance abuse? Is there ever a cross therapy where it's not just gambling?
Yeah, almost more often than not, there's a cross addiction. Overeating I don't know why exactly, but there can be this hunger that's created when you're not gambling. So talking about diet and exercise is part of our treatment. And then there can be, sex and porn addiction. There can be, alcohol, and any host of drug addictions.
Got it. Uh, what's the success rate of people who seek help?
It's hard to gauge, and I know that's not a great selling point. I'm just starting Stop Betting Sports, so I don't have follow-up data on how people are doing 1 year, 5 years later. The UCLA Gambling Studies program does follow-up interviews a year later, and the data indicates that the more sessions you do in therapy, the more GA involvement, the better prognosis that you're going to have for abstaining from gambling in a year's time. It's hard to gather that data.
Prognosis, yeah, you got a better prognosis, but let's be honest, this is gambling. It's just like in any other addiction. What's the rate of relapse? That's got to be real high, isn't
There's
it?
there's a whole bunch of different studies, and I've heard 90% of people relapse, and I just don't. But I don't like that. It's bullshit to me. One study will say 90%, one will say 50%. These numbers are not helpful. It's your individual relationship
Of
to your
course.
gambling, and do you recognize that this is a problem? Do you have the commitment to change it? And if you do recognize it's a problem and you do have the commitment, then you can and will abstain long term.
I love it. Good point. It's all the individual. Does Dan believe that professional sports bettors are real, or are we all just eventual or current addicts watching screens?
Like I said, my perspective is that of a gambling therapist that talks to problem gamblers. And I know that there are people that are not addicted, that have a functional relationship to sports betting, and do it recreationally or even make a living out of it. So I am aware that exists. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, a lot, and I'm glad you're aware of that, because a lot of therapists think that, nah, you're steering your guys wrong if you tell them you can't do that, you can't go pro.
That's right.
There is a very small chance you can. You know what I mean? If you listen to Be Better Bettors, for instance. All right. What are your thoughts on man of the line? Okay, I don't know what that man of the line. Okay. Here we go. Any thoughts on sportsbooks advertising with beautiful women? Could that be fueling these problem gamblers?
Yeah, I mean, sex sells. So you have a beautiful woman on the screen. You associate that sexual image with gambling. I mean, it's marketing 101. And
Absolutely.
yeah, like there could be unfortunately a connection between, oh, I'm going to gamble, and when I win the gambling, I'm going to have enough money to pay for sex, and that's an issue that I've worked with on more than a few occasions. I feel like shit without money. I win money. The girl, the girls are going to like me more, or I'm going to pay for the pretty girl. And so the self-esteem issue outside of gambling and money, is something that has to be plodded through in therapy, because that's a tough one to address.
Yeah. I also want to just state, there's a lot of beautiful women out there that, talk about picks, sell picks, give out picks for free. And usually there's an inverse correlation with how good looking the girl is versus how much she could win at betting sports. I think would that be a safe assessment to make?
I think that's probably spot on.
All right. I love it. Any other questions here? Here we go. Combining sports betting with sex, what can go wrong? That's what somebody just said right there. Ryan C.
Well, like bipolar disorder, you're preoccupied with your phone and what's happening in a game. You're not having good sex because you're engaged in like a Chargers game. Put your phone down and have good sex with your girlfriend.
Gotcha.
Seriously, it preoccupies you. You could be literally checking scores before, during, and after sex with your partner.
Fair enough. All right. Have you ever had a quote unquote winning player that came for treatment, maybe making lots of money, created other problems? Oh shit, that's a nice question.
Well, when they see me, the money's gone. But I have, heard of, scenario, runs that have lasted, a few years, actually. Yeah. I mean, people have been on good, successful runs. I've also had a couple clients that were collegiate or professional athletes. And I think that's another a burgeoning issue, is that people that, didn't make it to the pros, but are very competitive and very involved in sports, that drive got hijacked by gambling addiction. And I
Wow.
think that that's going to be an issue on college. I know it is an issue, and we're going to see a lot more of that. Because when you're a college athlete, you're a superstar in so many levels. And if you're making money, you're being paid if you're an elite athlete on college campuses. So you're a superstar and you have money and you're gambling. That could really blow up in your face when the spotlights turn off.
Gotcha. All right, I think we're done, and we'll give another minute or two for any more questions. Dan, the name of this podcast is called Be Better Betters. For you, it's stopbettingsports.com. That's how you should recommend people not to be better, just not bet, right?
Right.
But what can you say maybe to some advice? Like, if let's just say somebody is out there saying, Dan, listen, I think I might have an issue. I don't know really. I can't stop, but it's not ruining my life per se. I enjoy it, but I think it's under control, but I could see it getting out of control one day. Like, I'm on that cusp, of it's under control, but I don't know. Should I take a session? Should I start doing something about it before it gets out of control? Is that something that you've seen a lot that maybe you could give advice on?
Yeah, I would look at my sports betting in the aggregate over the last 12 to 24 months and look at those instances in which you maybe threw your cell phone against the wall, or banged the table, or were in desperate shakes financially. We tend to underplay the severity of the hardships that we've experienced and be in some degree of denial and not really acknowledging. So take an honest look of how things have been in the last couple of years in the aggregate, in those instances in which you made promises to yourself which you did not keep, in which you had intentions to address the gambling issue and you did not take them. And with a spirit of love and hopefulness, give a call to Stop Betting Sports, or someone to talk about it, to get some counsel.
I love it. What I always tell, if you just keep accurate records, and if you just keep records of your betting, you'll realize how much money you're spending on this, how much you're losing a week, how much you're losing a month, and then you have to see if, listen, or how much you're winning, if for anybody that's winning, are you comfortable with that number? And I think records, because like you said, Dan, a lot of people just they just forget about the bad times or how bad things happen. But if you keep accurate records and you could see a whole big picture a month later, 2 months later, I think keeping good records is a good step towards identifying the problem and seeing, oh, wow, I'm really, losing this much money on gambling.
Absolutely.
Maybe I should cut it down. I think accurate record keeping, if I were to give some advice, is a good first step on getting to that. Let me see here. We got another question. Well, okay. Okay. Do you, hold on. Do you have more sports bettors come to you than horse bettors?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Gotcha.
But horse betting has a special love and passion. The people that like racing, usually their dads took them to the track and they love the animals. And there's something appealing about horse racing to me, in that way. My uncle was very involved in horse racing and promoting. He actually promoted horse racing in media. So it's a bit of a different animal with horse racing, like literally, but increasingly I'm seeing more sports bettors.
Let me just share a story. This is kind of a crazy story, but it's kind of it's I don't know if this is a good thing or not to admit, but me and my buddy, sometimes we'd say, listen, why don't we, one day we went to the track and we said, instead of betting on the horses, instead of watching the screens, we would pick a person watching the horse races, and we would bet on who would have more negative reaction. So instead of watching a horse race, we would just watch the people watching the races. And I tell you, the entertainment, and again, I don't want to, again, but the entertainment and watching people sweat a horse race is by far one of the best things to look. And then, and then you actually bet with your buddy on who would have the more negative reaction. I think that's just is something that to just kind of turn it around a little bit and have a fun day at the track.
Yeah, we're kindred spirits that way. That sounds entertaining to me too.
Okay, good. I love it. Okay. Okay. What do you think about? What do you think about when you see mixed comedy with betting advice, so-called betutainment?
I don't know about betutainment, but it's normalizing sports betting, and it's sort of like promoting crack cocaine in your comedy act. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but I definitely have mixed feelings about that.
Gotcha. Do you think sports betting, predetermined or fixed, can lead to this addiction and mental health being worse? A lot of people think a lot of these games are fixed, which is, I think it's bullshit, but let's just skip that one. Okay, next. I just want to say thank you to both for you guys for doing this. A lot of good info. Okay, on your clients usually getting good CLV. That's obviously not. Harold, if you can't learn something from this stuff, you ain't trying. Thanks, Spanky and Dan, for your time and efforts. Thanks for doing this live, Spanky. Great as always. Always tremendous detailed answers, Dan. Excellent stuff. Thanks for sharing. All right, I think we're good. Dan, such a pleasure, my man.
It really was. Spanky, thank you so much. I love talking about this stuff.
I love
really
this,
do.
and hopefully, if anybody out there, let me just say it right now. If you have a problem, talk to Dan. Look at him. He's he's a real nice guy, down to earth. You see him like, you know what I mean? He's not going to bang you out. First consultation is always free, Dan, for the most part.
Yes.
Okay. First consultation's free. Just mention the code Be Better Betters, or what are we doing here? It's always free no matter what.
It's mentioned Be Better Betters. Yeah.
All right, you got it, Dan. But yeah, give Dan a call if you're having a problem. And it's nothing embarrassing. We all have problems. Everybody has problems. Listen, I got to lose weight. You know what I mean? I'm not in the best of shape. Nobody's perfect. We all have different issues, and nothing to be ashamed about. That's just part of life. Nobody's perfect, and you just work on trying to solve the little problems that you have in life, and before they become big problems. And if they're big problems, don't worry about it. There's always a way. Suicide's never the answer. I'm a firm believer in that. So hopefully we could touch some people out here listening to this.
I hope so.
And then again, the name of the website, stopbettingsports.com. Dan,
thank you, Spanky.
Thanks so much for the time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
Until next time.
Until next time.